Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It's Wednesday, March the 26th, 2025, and today's topic, I mentioned it yesterday, but it's going to be called Rituals and Routines. Before we begin, welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new to the channel. I sketch and post every day, and I use a timer to stay focused and to build a habit. I'll start a 10-minute timer, but these videos have been longer than 10 minutes. This has been a deep dive into a series that I call Artist Life. I'll link the other videos in the series. Basically, it's this week, so I started on Monday. And so yeah, if you want more details, I basically started on a blank page, took notes about different things. So yeah, it's up to you. It's a deep dive. But today I'm going to, for the artistic portion of the program, I'm going to work on the castle area, but I'm going to take my time because I worked on the sky from yesterday, from the progress I made yesterday. I like it, so I mean, I like the picture. So at this point, it's starting to go into like detail because I pretty much have the composition and like the values and the color scheme. So now it's just details, and the most detailed part will be like the castle. So yeah, if you're curious about how this came about, you can check out the other videos, and also the information. So yesterday I talked about focus and habits, and then today it's going to be rituals and routines, and they're all connected, and I'll revisit these topics again. This is the first experiment, and this picture is also an experiment, so I'll do videos focusing on like the actual process. For today, I'm just going to kind of start to fill in the details. So I'll revisit the topic. I mean, it takes me a little while to kind of formulate my thoughts. What helps is if I think about how I'm actually using these things that I'm actually talking about, or like how I'm actually using it. Like that usually helps. So for example, let's start with like the idea of the rituals. So I approach art making like a ritual, and I guess I can explain the term. I mean, there's obviously like kind of the definition of it, but then there's sort of like the meaning it has, like for me personally. So I mentioned how part of it is like getting comfortable with whatever medium that you're using or whatever instrument that you're using. So there's a kind of ritual to it, like a warm-up. And I'll go into more detail once I kind of get my brain and hand-eye coordination going. And then the idea of routines has to do with first the way, so some of this is time management, although I can talk about that a little bit more in detail at some other time, so to speak. But some of it is that. I mean, it's part of that. And so the routine, so speaking of time management, I just approach it based upon what's already kind of established, and then I modify it to work for myself, like my personality and like how I do things. So with that in mind, routines, for example, at its most kind of basic level is sleep, and then work, and then play if you want to, or not working if you want to look at it from like its most basic level. And so just managing that, for example, and some of this, so nothing that I'm saying is like, this is what's like what I do, like this is what I genuinely do, but obviously take what you need from it or care about. But yeah, that's kind of up to you to make those choices for yourself. I'm just sharing my experience with stuff. Just same with like with this. I'm not saying this is the proper way to make pictures, although I do know what makes a good picture, so take that however you wish. So yeah, going back to basic level, sleeping, I mean, if you can figure out like a way to sleep well or sleep better, it'll make a big difference. I know that for sure, like for myself, although my sleep schedule sometimes like fluctuates. So that's why I have the rituals and routines going. And then work, for example. So like work and play, I don't really like to, well, I mean, I don't mind calling it that. That's kind of its own topic too. Work, for example, would be like this is work. And so it could be argued, well, you're doing like art, which you like to do. True. However, it's a little different than like play. So if I'm just like playing a video game, I would call that like play. Or if I'm playing guitar, for example, like I consider myself like a beginner at guitar, and I've been doing it for years. I still consider myself a beginner because I approach it like play. And so it might kind of seem like when I do art, it seems kind of like serious or something. It's not that it's serious, it's work. I approach it like it's actual like work for me. So I think that's kind of important to sort of get straightened out like in your mind. Like when I play guitar, I don't put pressure on myself. It could be argued, why even put pressure on yourself with art? And that's true. Like, part of it is because it is work. And so there's like an element of, I know that there will be some resistance and some pain involved. Like, if you even want to call it that, like, I get that. So that's just something to keep in mind. So yeah, so sleep, which is rest, getting enough rest. And then, so that's why, like, it doesn't really matter if it's sleep or not. The important thing is, like, are you actually, like, rested? Or are you kind of pushing yourself? So rest, work, and play is sort of like the basic one. And then I actually have, because of like the sleep schedule thing that I was just talking about, I actually divide it into morning, which is like now, and then afternoon, which is afternoon, and then evening, so like evening stuff, like routine, and then like I call it like nighttime, which is the sleeping, usually, but sometimes I'll wake up or sometimes I'll stay up and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's better if I stick with it. And sometimes you have to switch. So I had a job where I was working overnight, which was not healthy for me, or maybe anyone, but like for me, for sure. I know some people have been at that job, like some people said they've been doing it for a long time, and it just doesn't really work for me. But I mean, I did it and suffered, suffered for it. But yeah, that's not really for me. So yeah, I basically have those 4 routines, and within that are like basically everything that you do is, again, this is just my kind of, maybe I'll start taking some notes here for those who like notes, which I do. And part of it is because I don't want to rush that picture. So routines, I've got the morning, the afternoon, if I can write, the evening, and again, these are just ideas. They're not, may not work for everyone, but part of why it works for me is because this is the actual day. Like these things come up. And then also, so this has to do with like the time of day. And then you also have the sleep. So this is kind of like energy. You have sleep, work, and then play. Or you could also call it like not work or non-work. Those are kind of like the 3 sort of main activities is really the thing. So I'll call it activities. So basically everything that you're doing is activities. So yesterday's video, I talked about focus and habits, and how a habit is an activity, but not all activities are habits, but all habits are activities. And I also talked about how habits are actually very like atomic, kind of like the book Atomic Habits, which was helpful. But yeah, it's a pretty good book from what I remember. So habits are things like thoughts could be habits. In fact, they call it like automatic negative thoughts. That was something that I had to work on. And I'm not going to go into like my personal history, but like it's stuff like that. That's not what the channel is about, but like some of the stuff that I'm talking about, like the rituals and routines, I mean, you might have to work through other issues before it actually can be manageable. But for me, it's like a daily thing, and it took years. But these are things that have helped and that I use daily. So everything is an activity. So I'm talking about kind of, you can apply this to anything, but specifically for, let's say, drawing. I can look at this and think, well, the next thing would be to go in with like a Sharpie. So this is like the lighter. I'm just doing like light to dark. So I could just add some shadow. Now I have some black pen lines, and I'm kind of saving that for like the really like detailed part, like the bricks and things like that. I might not need to. That's kind of how I'm approaching it. I'll do more videos, and plus I have a bunch of other videos. Just to kind of get back on topic of rituals and routines. So an activity can be made into a ritual. A ritual is an activity, like I was saying. So that's like everything. An activity is basically a bunch of actions that go together. Because part of this, a lot of this stuff that I talk about, like that I'm doing, that I'm talking about as far as like self-improvement, has like the focus is like art. So I had to think about, like, when you are making a picture, there's all these steps that go into making like a really great picture. And that's from studying other artists that I like their work. And so as I attempted to do it, I also learned a lot of kind of how they did it, but also how I do it, what works for me. So yeah, the ritual aspect of it has to do with, I call it, it's an activity, but like there's emotion involved, if that makes sense. So an activity is anything, and it doesn't have to be like emotional. You could wash the dishes or take out the trash or something like that. And so that's an activity. But like, let's say you are drawing, like the way that I am right now. Well, I care about it. So as soon as you like start to like actually care about it, then it becomes like a ritual. Now, I'm one of those people that, like, I've had personal issues I've had to deal with, whether it's anxiety or stuff like that, like perfectionism and things. And I mean, that's like personal, obviously, but I bring it up because, I mean, these are things that I personally deal with. So what I've learned from my own kind of life experience is that, like, stuff like anxiety, what it does is it attaches anxiety, which is like a feeling, with everything. So whatever it is that you're doing. So that's what I learned, basically, that so it's not the activity, but rather it's the fact that, like, there's a lot of caring about it, there's a lot of worry about it, or a lot of anxiety about it. And I mean, there's reasons, but I'm just saying, like, just from a kind of a mechanical viewpoint, or like a logical kind of perspective. So then there's like a ritual element to it, like, if that makes sense. That was something that I like. It just has like it has a high emotional content involved. So it's an interesting thing. It might be helpful. It helped me, like, when I kind of started to look at it like that. And so with that in mind, I just used whatever I need to use in order to balance out like that emotional energy. So there could be things like, another way, if you kind of want to think about it, is when you say things like if you religiously do something, like, to me, like, that's kind of what that means. Like, if you religiously do something, and maybe religion is kind of, this is kind of off topic, but maybe religion is sort of a way to deal with society's like anxiety, who knows, but that's another topic there. What was I saying? So yes, so a ritual is like an activity, but it has a high level of emotional, like, content of caring involved. And by caring, I don't necessarily mean like even good caring, but like emotion. Because if you didn't care about it, it wouldn't matter. Like you wouldn't care about doing it or not, or like you would just do it. So with that in mind, I just use the ritual like mechanism, like the process. I just use that to, so for example, like I'll set a timer religiously or like ritualistically, because there's like anxiety involved, which is automatic. So really the anxiety is the habit part. And then like when I set a timer, it's really not even, it starts to become a habit, but there's a very strong like habit already like in place. That's just like that, just to kind of get started, like talking about it. But it's just been helpful. So what happens is that I've noticed, for example, since I did bring up anxiety, like it never goes away. I mean, it's always, that's the other thing I've learned, is it keeps up with you. But it's like, if you can start on these better or like more positive kind of habits, then, or practices and stuff, then like it keeps up with it. So it's kind of like working out, kind of, you don't just do it and then you're done for the rest of your life. It's just like you sort of commit to it. And then the same with art. In some ways, the frustrating thing could be, well, why do I have to keep learning? But that's what makes it fun or exciting or interesting, is because there's always something new. And that's why I love it, or like it's interesting. I mean, I don't always love it. So for example, like I had to spend some extra time figuring out like how this sky was going to look, and I just kind of did this partly because I wasn't happy with it, so I painted over it with like paint, just to get the clouds like looking okay. But then I also learned, so in a way I was fixing like mistakes, but I also learned kind of a interesting technique that I could use. But there's more, but I just wanted to get the conversation started about rituals and routines, and I'll revisit the topic again at some point. I think tomorrow I might talk about, it'll be a surprise. We'll see. It'll be a surprise to me too. So yeah, I want to thank you for joining me for our daily sketching routine. And if you like these videos, please support the channel. I appreciate it. And until next time, keep on sketching.